This is the brilliant Defender 90, but this particular version has a twist. Under the bonnet is Land Rover's equally brilliant 5-litre supercharged V8. It's a great combination on paper. Brilliant car meets brilliant engine. Surely then, this package can be nothing other than perfection.
Well, if we're talking about the way it goes down a road, then absolutely, this thing is properly quick. That engine makes a very healthy 525 metric horsepower, and it'll do 0 to 62 in 4.9 seconds. Top speed is a very healthy 149 miles an hour, and there is just so much torque anywhere in the rev range, and that noise, it's just glorious. You marry that monster under the bonnet with the aggressive looks of this next generation Defender, and what you get is pure theatre. It goes like stink, it looks the part, and it sounds like a monster has just eaten a child and now has tummy ache. Now on paper, that might sound like the perfect machine to a lot of people, but for me, well, I'm not so sure.
You see, rather than being perfect, I actually think this car might be, in some ways, a little bit pointless, because not many things about it seem to make any sense. The first problem is the price. At just shy of £100,000, it's getting on for almost twice the cost of the entry-level Defender 90.
The other problem is practicality. You see, this is an SUV, and in my mind, SUVs are meant to be spacious and easy to live with. This is neither of those things. Have a look at the boot. Big chunky door, tiny boot. It's 231 litres. It's smaller than the boot you get in a Ford Fiesta. You can't get a weekly shop in that. You can't take your family to the airport, not with luggage, not unless you want to do 4 trips. There's a couple of decent bits to do with it. For example, the rear seats fold down nice and easy, and there's a 3-pin power outlet. But apart from that, it is an absolute joke. Ridiculous. The other issue is that because the Defender 90 is a 3-door car, it can be quite difficult to get in and out. Not necessarily the front, because you've got a nice big grab handle to haul yourself up, but if you're a rear passenger, then it's a bit of a faff. It basically involves you pulling this tab, pressing this button, and waiting, and waiting, and waiting. You can't do this manually. It just involves waiting and waiting and waiting while people in the car park stare at you, by the way. And then when there's enough room, you get your kids aboard, you follow them into the back and then do up their seatbelts. There is quite a lot of leg and headroom back there and some USBs, but then the faff begins again when you've got to move the seat back. You've got to press that button and hold it while it makes enough room for you to get in the front, which again just takes up way too much time. I do like the fact there's a nice big sunroof and there's a nice little quarter light up here which lets even more light in. But look at this, these windows don't wind down, which means that if you suffer from claustrophobia or car sickness, then guess what? All that sick is heading straight for the front.
Speaking of which, that end of the car is nicely designed, with a rugged looking and practical interior, and a good infotainment system. Standard cars use a 10-inch curved display, but this particular car uses the new optional 11.4-inch screen. Land Rover has also very thoughtfully included an air quality sensor and a cabin air ionization system with a PM 2.5 filter, potentially useful in the days of a pandemic. But there are downsides too. It doesn't deliver a lot more than the base car. Those who enjoy showing off the fact they've splashed out on the top model might be a bit disappointed that it doesn't come with more extras. The standard Defender 90 is available in 7 different paint finishes. The V8, only 3. And aside from the 22-inch glossy wheels, which will surely get ruined if it ever goes off-road, those blue brake calipers, the quad exhaust pipes, plus the not particularly obvious V8 badging, you'd be hard-pressed convincing people you'd splashed out the best part of 50 grand extra on the best of the best.
So it seems like a bit of an odd machine, this thing, doesn't it? It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense in a lot of ways. Of course, there is one simple solution to this car's problems, and that is to not buy this car. Just buy the Defender 110 V8, which is a proper SUV. But here we are in the 90, so let's figure out what it's like to drive. To its credit, the steering is very good. I love this physical steering wheel. This suede material is exceptional. Get it muddy at your peril. And the center spokes look and feel magnificent. I don't know if it's metal or granite, but it feels so sturdy, so solid. It's a brilliant design. It's also very accurate, very nimble. It's got a high driving position which lets you see the world around you really easily, and it's got a comparatively short wheelbase in comparison to a larger SUV, and you combine that with a really impressive 360-degree camera system, then it's a very simple car to drive, especially around town. On paper, it should drive well on the open road as well, because that engine is the basis for a lot of exceptional driving machines. The Jaguar F-Type, the Jaguar XJ, the Range Rover Sport SVR. And while it is impressive in a straight line, very impressive, things start to fall over a little bit when you encounter a corner. It's got a lot of body roll. It does like to lean. Back in the days, that would have been completely forgivable, but nowadays, there are so many high-performance SUVs that have anti-roll stabilization systems that enable them to stay completely flat through the bends. This thing, not so much.
Land Rover says it has unique suspension tuning with bespoke spring and damper rates, plus larger, solid anti-roll bars that try to give it better body control. But trust me, it can still be quite alarming in the corners. There's also a new electronic rear diff and a dynamic mode that sharpens the throttle and dials back the stability control systems so you can actually slide it around on loose tarmac, for example. But on the road, this is not a car that instills immediate confidence or rewards you in the bends.
Where I think this car works best is if you dial it back a little bit and try and keep in mind that it's not a Range Rover Sport SVR. It's a very fast SUV in a straight line. Once you do that, then you start to really appreciate what this car is all about. The ride is reasonably smooth. I mean, it's a little bit on the fidgety side because it's got 22-inch wheels and they've tried to beef up the suspension as much as possible to give it some ability to handle corners, but generally it's on the right side of comfortable, and the gearbox is phenomenal. It's an 8-speed automatic that almost feels psychic. It always seems to be in the right gear at the right time. Plus, this is the first Defender that comes with flappy paddles. Look, you've got paddle shifters behind the steering wheel. Now that might sound like a bit of a gimmick, but it's not, because it allows you to really hold on to the revs and send the car up towards that red line where you can really hear that V8 sing. You can even hear a little hint of a supercharger whine. On the subject of that noise, actually, is it as good as I've heard from this V8 in the past? Not really, because it's packed to the gills with gas particulate filters that mean it doesn't pop and bang and growl quite as impressively as cars from back in the day that might have used this engine. But I can't lie, it's still a lovely sound.
We're not showing it off today, but it's also important to remember that the Defender 90 is a ridiculously capable car off-road. Check our review of the diesel version to see more of that. It has an ability to take on almost any terrain. If driving through rivers, up mountains, or feeling like a bad guy from James Bond is your thing, then there's not many that do it better. And for my money, it also looks incredibly cool. Sure, this particular version might not make the most sense in the world, and the drawbacks could be a deal breaker if you're looking at it objectively, but you could also argue that it's those quirks that make the Defender 90 V8 a compelling proposition.
So here's the bottom line. I've sat here and I've given you plenty of very logical reasons why the Defender 90 V8 doesn't make a lot of very logical sense. It's impractical, it doesn't drive as well as a Range Rover Sport SVR, and it costs an absolute fortune, amongst other things. But weirdly, it's all of those imperfections that make this car so much cooler. So many cars nowadays are seemingly designed by committee, designed to tick as many boxes as possible. And meanwhile, this thing is just refreshingly mad. It shouldn't exist in today's world. It's a small SUV with a big V8, and yet it does exist. And weirdly, the world is a little better because of that.